I'm Rob, and I'm shipping my Yamaha T7 down to Santiago, Chile. Ride down to Ushuaia, turning around, and riding all the way back to Canada. Follow me to see where I'm going next. Hey everyone, the Roman Stray Dog here. So yeah, it's mid-November 2024, and I just wanted to do a recap of the trip, the bike, the mods that I did on the bike, and some of the gear. So yeah, so it's mid-November. I've been back since basically the beginning of August, and I've really just taken this time to kind of settle back into life here, and I've been meaning to do this video since I got back. So yeah, you know, as you know, I shipped the bike almost a year ago now. Rob and Steve and I shipped the bike from Vancouver down to Santiago, Chile. Then we rode north in Chile and Argentina, crossed the border into Argentina, and rode all the way south to Ushuaia. Turned around and then rode back through Patagonia, Chile and Argentina, and then into Bolivia and into Peru. And then it was around February, middle of February, that Steve just began his solo trip and left Rob and I as we wanted to do Machu Picchu and the Amazon, and Steve wasn't really quite interested in that. So for the next month or so, Rob and I spent time in Peru, and then rode out of Peru, down into Lima, up into Ecuador, over into Colombia, and around middle of March, Rob had to get home unexpectedly, so he and his bike flew home from Bogota to Vancouver around March 16th, and then I spent about another week or 10 days in Colombia, and then went back to Bogota, shipped my bike from Bogota to Panama, and then began my 4.5-month trip through Central America and the US back into Canada in late July. So some quick stats about the trip. It was about 37,251 kilometers. I produced over 100 videos here on YouTube, over 5,000 photos. By the time I got home, I was on my 4th rear tire and the 3rd front tire. I did 3 oil changes, 1 chain, a set of sprockets, a set of rear brake pads, as well as a rear wheel bearing on the right-hand side that I had to replace when the 3 of us were in Bolivia. So the bike, here it is, pretty much looks the same as when I left. The bike was absolutely outstanding. No complaints about it at all. So I wanted to go through all of the mods that I did on the bike and just give you all a bit of a sense of, you know, what my feelings, what my review were on all the mods, and if I would do anything differently, as well as a bit on my gear, and then as well as on a bit more on the maintenance and reliability of the T7. Okay, let's start on the mods on the bike. So first of all, I put on the Spirit Beast signal lights on the front, as well as on the rear of the bike. They were fantastic, really inexpensive. They performed well, no issues whatsoever with that. Next, I did some USB power upgrades to the bike. So I put this terminal on here, this USB here, and then I swapped the cigarette lighter from that side back over to this side. They performed great up until really probably near the end of the trip. I found that this one here, moisture was getting into it, so nothing really I could do about that. So I had to replace that when I got home, but other than that, that was pretty good. Heated grips. Yeah, I put the very inexpensive Rocky Mountain heated grips on the bike. Again, no issues. They're easy to install. They're really cheap, like 25 bucks. The only thing is that this one here rests on the bar, and the bar actually absorbs most of the heat, so it doesn't get very hot. This one worked well. Okay, the next thing, the headlight protector. So yeah, I put this one on. I had a metal one before, but I put the plastic one on because I just thought it looked better. Yeah, it's fine, it's great, it's inexpensive. I mean, it's a little bit hard to clean inside, but other than that, it worked well. What else? Let's see. Oh yeah, the AXP bash plate. This is fantastic. It's not cheap. It's like over 300 bucks, but it's plastic, it's light, and it performed really, really well. I'd highly recommend that. Then I put on a number of case guards, all of these sort of protections. These are really inexpensive as well. And one here, one here. I have one down here as well. And then on the other side of the bike, I've got this one here as well. So again, great. I think those are wise to do. I also put on the Camel one finger clutch improvement. Again, that's really great. Just makes the clutch operation that much easier and smoother. I also put on the Camel rear brake hack fix. Again, that really gets rid of the sponginess on the rear brake of the T7. Really recommend that. No issues with that. Also add that rear master brake protection. I think that worked well as well. Then I put on the Camel ADV tail tidy. Again, that gets rid of the massive tail license plate holder and the huge ugly Yamaha lights. I did have an issue with this. This broke when I was in Colombia, and Steve's broke when we were in Bolivia. And lucky for Steve, he caught it before it actually got ripped around the wheel, which would have been really a problem. I was able to notice mine just before it fell completely off as well. So again, a bit lucky there. So what happened, the weld just broke here. So I was able to get that re-welded in Nicaragua at a friend's place, and it survived. But Camel's actually shipped me another one, which is great. I talked to them, and Corey got back to me right away, and they shipped me another one. So they figured out what's going on, and they've replaced that. So, but overall, they make great products, and I recommend that for it as well. What else did I do? Larger foot pegs. So, yeah, I put these foot pegs on. It's really nice to have wider foot pegs on the T7 as I stand a lot. These are fairly inexpensive. However, they're aluminum. And they can break. And they haven't broken on this bike, but I have a Husky 350, and I've got basically the same type of pegs on that bike, and I've broken pegs on that bike. So yeah, that's just something to be concerned about. There are other ones out there that are metal, and I would probably recommend the metal ones. So yeah, what else? Oh yeah, I put on the SW Motec crash bars. They work great. However, this bolt here, because of the bike falling on this side of the crash guard, it actually stripped the bolt inside here, which has been a problem. So I actually fixed that. We fixed this when we were in Patagonia, and I still got the fix in there. But anyway, it seems to work fine. Also put on the driving lights. They were great, although I had to replace one when I got to Lima. These are the replacement ones. The other ones, water got into the light and corroded the electronics in there. So that was that needed to be repaired. Put on the double take mirrors, fantastic, although I did lose this one on the Carretera Austral in southern Chile, and I had to get it replaced when I got to Lima. I got a tank bag, the Tusk tank bag, that worked really well. I've got the Tusk back rear rack. That's great, but I had to grind down the edges because they're really quite abrupt and sharp, and they were actually wearing through the underneath of the Moscow bags. So I ground those down ahead of the trip, which was a good idea. And then for the electronics, I talked about this before I left. So I carried a backup iPhone with a quad lock, worked really great. And then I installed the Samsung Active 3 tablet. There on the tablet, I could run OpenStreetMaps, which was really good. So I had some redundancy. I ran OpenStreet here and I ran Google there. And I really liked that setup. So although I had to customize the mounting of this, it just wasn't really sort of up to par, so I had to fix that. And then I've got this little wind deflector, it's inexpensive through AliExpress in China. This one's broken. I broke that in a fall. Actually not on my trip, but once I got home. So yeah, so that's basically the mods. Oh, I also did the K-Tech suspension, front and rear. Bigger springs on the front, bigger spring on the back. However, I'm still not happy with the front. That was around $1,800 US, that K-Tech mod. And as I said, I'm still not happy with the front. The front still seems to bang a bit. And so that's something that's on my mind to get that fixed or upgraded. I don't know if it just needs bigger springs or valves. I'm not really sure, but I'll be talking to the guys that installed that for me, and hopefully they can help me out. Also put on a Churbe's crash handguards, which are great, and I had the Achuby's 22-liter tank. Really, really necessary. There's just not enough capacity in the OEM tank, which is only 16 liters. This is 22 liters, so that was really, really good. So overall, all the mods performed very well, other than the tail tidy, as I mentioned. So yeah, but thankfully Camels looked after that. Okay, so now why don't we switch gears and talk a little bit about the bike. So after 37,000 kilometers of the trip, what do I think overall of the bike, and you know, what type of issues have I had with it? So I'm happy to report that after 60,000 kilometers on the bike, I've had very little to complain about. Not once did this bike leave me stranded. It started every single morning, every day. I was never worried about that. And it runs today like the day I rode it out of the shop 3+ years ago. As I mentioned, it has 60,000 kilometers on it. And when I left, it had 24,000. I was debating at the time whether I do the valves, which is at the 40,000 kilometer mark, but I decided I didn't want to mess with it before the trip. And it's got 60,000 on it, and I still haven't checked the valves. It runs perfectly. I'm not worried about it, but I will get that done before next season. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had really no issues with this bike. And I attribute that to Yamaha. I mean, they build bikes that are solid, strong, and are meant to last. Oh yeah, I did have one other little issue. It was with the kickstand switch. So that's a known issue. The switch there actually gets clogged with dirt, and then as you're riding, it can actually kick off the bike. The bike will stop. That happened once in Patagonia, and it happened once in Idaho. It's not a problem. You just get down there and clean it out. But there's a hack. I'm going to do that this winter. And as I mentioned earlier, I had to replace one of the rear wheel bearings on the right hand side, and I don't know if that is just from washing the bike and having water sit in there. I don't really know, but I was lucky to get that replaced in Bolivia. The actual wheel bearing was $5. It cost me $20 to repair it. So lucky that we were able to find a wheel bearing there in this tiny little town in Bolivia. So that wheel bearing, had to replace it at 35,000 kilometers. It lasted me another 25,000 kilometers in 5 months. When I got to Flagstaff, Arizona, I had to replace it there. So yeah, so that's the only really issues I've had with this bike. It's an amazing bike, highly recommend it, super, super reliable, and just a ton of fun to ride. Yeah, so let's talk about the maintenance and repairs of this bike on the trip. So the first maintenance stop was about after 10,000 kilometers as we rode back into Santiago, Chile around January 29th. Here we did an oil and filter change. The tires were good, so I didn't bother replacing those. And at kilometer 13,000 of the trip, or 36,500 on the bike, again, that rear wheel bearing went. So again, just as I mentioned, I replaced that. The next maintenance stop was in Lima, Peru, at about just under 15,000 kilometers into the trip. And here I replaced both tires, front and rear. So to start the trip, I was running the Aniki Wild on the front and the Tractionator GPS, which is a little more road oriented. I had that on the rear. Those two tires lasted me 14,800 kilometers. Really, really outstanding in my mind. So when we got to Lima, I replaced those and I put the GPS on the front. So that was the matching one from the rear that I just ran. And then on the rear, I went to the Tractionator, the Moto Z Tractionator Adventure. And I've run this tire 4 times, and it's definitely my favorite tire. It's more off-road oriented, so I was thinking that I wouldn't get that great a mileage out of it. You know, here in Kamloops, when I'm riding around here, I get around 9,000 kilometers out of it. So I was kind of thinking maybe I'd get the same. So this next set of tires, as I said, it went to the GPS on the front and the Tractionator on the rear. Those tires took me to Mexico City, and again, I got around 13,500 kilometers. So what I was thinking I was going to get around 9 on that Tractionator, I got 13 and a half. And on the front GPS, again, 13,500 kilometers, it probably could have gone another 2,500, but I thought, okay, let's change it. I'm in Mexico City, not sure where I'm going to be when I need to change tires again. So I thought I'd change them out. And the only tires that I could source in Mexico City there at that shop were Bridgestone AX41s. So I hadn't used these tires before, didn't really know much about them, but I thought, hey, okay, the Bridgestone, let's go with them. As it turned out, these tires are crap. The rear tire, it only lasted me 3,500 kilometers. So that took me from Mexico City to Scottsdale, Arizona. So I had to switch it out, and again, I went back to the Moto Z Tractionator Adventure. I used the Bridgestone AX on the front, and I still have it on it, so it made it home, but I'm not happy with it. So I would not recommend running those tires if you want any decent tread wear out of the tires whatsoever. So as I mentioned, I did 3 oil changes. I had a little bit of an issue with the ABS brake sensor and the odometer, because the wiring goes down underneath, and the rad guard that I had, the wire was sitting over top of this little flange on the rad guard, and after months and months, it actually wore through the wire, and so I had to repair that. It took me quite a while to figure that out, but once I did, everything's all back to normal, and I was good to go again. So I figured that total parts, and costs of the trip. So that one set of sprockets, about $150. I replaced the chain in Salt Lake City, about $225. A set of rear brake pads, $50. 4 tires for the rear, $800, $900, somewhere in there. 3 front tires, around $600. Oil changes, the 3 oil changes, about $50 an oil change. So that's about $150. $25 for the rear wheel bearing and the labor. So I figured I got about $2,110 in terms of maintenance and repairs. And that works out to about 5.5 cents per kilometer on the trip. As far as fuel goes, I'm not really quite sure. On average, the bike would get between 4.5 to 5.5, 6 liters per 100 kilometers, depending on your riding speed, wind, hills, whatever the case is. But let's just say we average this at 5 liters per 100. I figure I went through around 1,900 liters of fuel. And at, say, an average of $1.50 per liter of fuel, I figure that's around $2,800 in fuel, or about 91 fill-ups on the tank. So between fuel and maintenance and repairs, I think I spent around $5,000. And if you take that and divide it by the amount of kilometers I did, it's around 13 cents a kilometer. So really not bad at all. Love this bike, 60,000 kilometers on it now. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to keep it. I got a few things I want to do. Going to grease the linkage. Going to repair that rear wheel bearing. It's got the second Chinese one in it in the rear, so I'm going to replace that with better wheel bearings on both sides of the right rear. Do the brake pads. Get the valves checked. Probably sync the carbs. And yeah, maybe get some tweaks done to the front suspension, but I figure at 60,000 kilometers, this bike has got many, many more kilometers in it. So again, can't say enough about the T7. Yamaha sure builds reliable, good bikes. Yeah, it doesn't have all the fancy electronics, heated grips, heated seats, electronic suspension, none of that. But in my mind, that's a good thing. It makes the bike way more reliable. And if you have some of those things go when you're, somewhere down in Bolivia or Peru or southern Argentina, it's going to be difficult getting those things fixed. It could really, really upset your trip. So I made the right choice in terms of the bike. I wouldn't hesitate to ride this bike around the world or take it on another long trip. So yeah, again, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next adventures from the Romy Stray Dog. So one last thing that I wanted to review, and that's the Moscow Reckless 80 soft bags. So I love these bags. They're super easy and flexible. So I had 25 liters here, 25 liters here, and then 30 liters in the duffel. It goes up top. And I thought it was a really great setup because I put all my personal gear in here. So that was isolated from everything else and I could just grab that and go. And then I had all camping gear on one side, which, yeah, I camped a whole, 2 whole times, both in Patagonia. And then when I got to Panama, I shipped all my camping gear home because I figured I just wasn't going to camp anymore. So yeah, I had all my camping gear in there. And then I had spare parts and food and whatever else in that side. The bags come on and off the bike, super easy. 3 straps at the back. 1 strap here and 1 strap on the other side. So it's really easy just to grab this bag and throw it over your shoulder like a saddle and just carry it into the hotel. So never at night did I leave the bags on the bike. It's like a 2-minute job to take the bags off and put them back on. So I always took the bags off. So there was one issue with the Moscow bags. So it broke right. Something happened here. Oh yeah, these straps here, they actually broke off, and one of these ones, oh, as you can see, this kind of peeled off as well. So this piece here, this piece here broke off, and then I had to kind of jerry rig it. And when I got home, I contacted Moscow, and they actually sent me a brand new piece. So this center piece here, which is great. So no charge. They guarantee these things for life. So it was really good. So I guess the only issue I would say with these bags is when you're going along, it's no issue for the rider, but they tend to bounce a bit, especially when you hit all the speed bumps. And as we know, Central America and South America, especially Central America and especially Mexico, there are topes or speed bumps everywhere. And when you hit these things, because, well, you hit them at speed, these things bounce around a lot. It doesn't affect the driver or the rider, but it certainly is noticeable to the guy behind you. But again, no big deal. I'd certainly recommend these, and I'm going to use these again and again.